is Deep Insight, the inside story. Every week, one conversation, no noise, no propaganda, just the facts, the power, and the people behind Nigeria's biggest stories. I call it Deep Insight, one conversation at a time. I'm Augustine Ohiria Agbonsu Remy. Today, Nigeria's security map is changing. Abductions in Oyo State's Ibarapa and Oriri in Kaba. Gallant soldiers fought back an attempt at another mass abductions at the government college, but not after a vice principal and two others lay dead. Mass kidnappings in Bonus, Goza, and Daboa. My guest is Professor Tope Oriola, criminologist at the University of Alberta, Canada, and one of the world's leading voices on Nigeria's insurgency. He has studied insecurity in Nigeria and the Sahel closely. He has written on Boko Haram and insurgency in Nigeria. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we have everyone saying poverty plus unemployment. You have argued it is deeper. State failure, contested authority, ecological stress. Break it down for us.
Well, once again, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to join you. Well, poverty in and of itself does not cause crime. A huge part of what contributes to the enterprise of crime and terrorism and so forth is embedded and metastasized social inequality. But within that realm, you've got to also have a number of extra theoretical factors, and in particular, state failure. And I think this is where the issues get complicated in the case of Nigeria. Decades of poor performance by the state apparatus, not just in the provision of basic necessities of life, but a seeming lack of vision in galvanizing the country towards a defined goal. These things are playing out in a number of ways across various communities. Now, a more relatable way to explain that is the fact that a lot of these attacks are occurring in rural spaces, whether that is in Oyo State, that's a fundamental rural area, and of course Borno State. So the most recent kidnapping of school children was at a location close to the Sambisa forest. Yeah. These are not accidents of geography. These are very performative and concise selection processes that these bandits or terrorists are making in order to choose where to attack. Now, in other words, for far too many areas in our country, the presence of the government is simply not felt. No police services, no ambulance services, and the occasional encounters you have with soldiers are the only reminders that a government exists. And then, of course, electricity is almost non-existent in a lot of those communities as well. So when you lack such a visible presence, even at a performative level in communities, it is an invitation to chaos. You're simply empowering a lot of non-state, extra-state actors to step in and fill that void. And that's what we see in predominantly rural areas of northeast Nigeria, northwest Nigeria.
So what we are saying is that the presence of governance is lacking in these areas. And so those who are desirous of taking the space have quick opportunities to take them.
Absolutely, and far too easy. It's becoming far too easy, far too comfortable. They don't even have to do a lot. There doesn't have to be any serious, sustained strategic thinking around those elections because these communities are there for the taking. And when you also consider that these are individuals and communities that don't feel any kind of serious connection with the government or the state, as an entity, as an institution. So it becomes very easy. And this is part of the reason why Boko Haram, for example, was able to spread within such a very short time.
Yeah, and talking about Boko Haram, you have studied Boko Haram for over 15 years. I've seen documents that you have worked on in the last 15 years. You warned about copycat violence. Prof, did anyone in Abuja listen?
I don't think so. I do not think so. My very first book, this may interest you, was on political kidnapping in the Niger Delta region. I sent a copy of that book to the State House. By the time I returned to Canada, within a couple of months of doing research here, there was an expressly delivered mail from the presidency acknowledging the receipt of the book. So it did get there through the emissary. But within a month or so, the actions of the government showed that nobody had read the book. So it's one thing to do research.
And for the research to
make any impact. And this is the frustration, I think.
So what you are saying, Prof, is that just like you, it appears the government does not listen to outsiders or insiders who are taking the pain to make recommendations.
Absolutely. And I think there is a particular disdain for scholars. In governmental circles in our country. I say that with a very saddened heart. In other words, you can write what you want, research what you want, and they will simply do things how they wish. This was not even under the current government, by the way. This was 2015, successive government, so this is not a political party thing necessarily. This is a widespread issue. The failure to conduct governance in a scientific way. I think a lot of policies and programs far too often are just based on political expediency rather than science-backed evidence approach.
Now, we have seen banditry, we have seen a lot of, including highway attacks on individuals. We have seen abductions in schools along the Kaduna Abuja corridor. We have seen it down south. Now it started from northwest to from northeast to northwest down to north central, and several students up to the last one, combined figure of 78 between Borno and Oyo students and teachers taken. Is this banditry, or are we seeing a convergence of bandits, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the new group like the Lukarawa? What is the taxonomy for this?
Well, the distinction now between bandits and terrorists is purely academic. In reality, there's been a convergence and confluence of interests and groups. That's not to say that they don't have distinct identities. They do. But operationally, they've been coming together for at least the last 5 years. There are documented instances from as far back as the first quarter of 2021 where bandits and terrorists and Boko Haram affiliated individuals
have been converged
and converged and cooperated to carry out attacks. So for the bandits, training, weapons,
is this convergence deliberate or coincident?
I would say all of the above. It's a simple case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, and the collective enemy in this case being the Nigerian state. And therefore, these two distinct, seemingly disparate entities have found a common ground around the resources that they need, around objectives, not necessarily ideology. This is what distinguishes them. Bandit groups don't necessarily think of, spreading Sharia law to any region of the country. That's for the Islamistly linked groups. But in terms of operational cooperation, provision of weapons, tactical acumen, and you have exchanges going on, but also bandits are not always, at least at the onset, when they have scores of individuals that have been kidnapped, they don't always at the beginning have the mechanism to keep them for months and months while negotiations were drag on. This was where partly how the terrorist groups who had developed the capacity for that began to step in. So there is a symbiotic relationship between bandit groups and terrorist groups. Now, we can make a bit of distinction, again, in terms of their overall or overriding objective, but operationally on the ground, there has been a huge level of cooperation going on for some time.
For years, we have seen the movement? Northeast, northwest, north central? What became attractive in southwest? What changed?
Well, contagion is a word for that. In other words, we all have a stake in the welfare and well-being of our neighbors. Not necessarily in the best interest of the neighbor, but in our own informed interest or rational self-interest. Now, it was always a matter of time. These things never get contained somewhere, especially with the fluidity and porosity of the borders. And so, given that this is a single country with free movement of people and goods and services, that was always a question of time. The moment the state failed to sniff this phenomena out of the Northeast and Northwest, it was always a question of time before it was spread to other parts of the country.
Because if you have this idea that it was always going to get there, just like as we are saying now, it's just in the south, it got to the southwest. It could get to south and maybe even southeast and down the oil producing areas if we do not do certain things.
Right.
If we know that these things will always move, what is holding us back?
Well, this is the most difficult question you have asked. It is one that I wish anyone had an answer to. But I think at the heart of the Nigerian state and its political system is one in which people play politics with human lives and for purposes of political expediency. You may recall, and you know this better than anyone, that President Jonathan was very clear at one point that there were Boko Haram sympathizers in his government, in the ministries, military, and so on and so forth. I have sat across the way you and I are sitting now from serving, not just retired, serving generals, 2014, 2015, up until 2018, who also spoke about that sometimes at the strategic level and the highest levels of military thinking, they sometimes you could not trust the next person seated next to you in terms of intelligence leaks and all of that. And it is not surprising, therefore, in the course of my research, I found that a lot of the intelligence leaks was coming from commissioned officers rather than non-commissioned officers, which makes sense because those are the ones responsible.
So part of your study is that the leaks, if we are looking at where it is, we should look at commissioned officers.
Absolutely. That's where it starts from. And what the politics of the day favors, a part of how we got to where we are was the political toxicity of the 2015 presidential election, where senior military officers, including those with major responsibilities for the war against Boko Haram, were openly identifying themselves as APC officers or PDP officers. And their calculation was very simple, that political neutrality in the Nigerian military was dangerous for your career. In other words, to advance, you needed to be aligned with one of the political parties. And so they decided to go the route that they
I was actually going to ask, what benefit lie therein for commissioned officers? Is it internal benefit or external benefit? But you have narrowed it down to internal benefits. I was looking at, is there a nexus between the insurgents and the military? Because we have also had situations where information is given out.
Right.
Like the National Assembly recently asked that, why is it that a few hours to a school attack, we have withdrawal of troops?
Right.
Who is benefiting? And these benefits, are they external or internal?
I would say all of the above. Each context is different, but it's generally a matter of what people feel is in their best interest, whether that's certain positions they're seeking in the military, whether that is trying to cushion their retirement days, so financial inducements. Boko Haram, as far back as 2010, and certainly 2014, 2015, was capable of offering up to $10,000 per actionable intelligence. That's not a fictitious figure. That's something I got.
$10,000
per actionable intelligence. And therefore, in those days, a battalion would receive weapons from the headquarters, and in less than 24 hours, it would get attacked, and the weapons would be stolen.
You wrote about franchising of violence in one of your papers. We have seen smaller cells, faster hits, crypto ransoms, micro ransom, 500K, 100 million. Is this banditry adapting to military pressure or something new?
So they have shown an incredible capacity to adapt and adjust and morph. And it's important to also mention that as far back as 2022, bandit groups were named terrorist groups in Nigeria. So in law, at least, and this is officially gazetted, in law, at least, as we speak, a lot of these bandit groups are, in fact, terrorist groups as far as the legal system is concerned. That's different from one or two individuals and, they running a kidnapping ring with their, kidnapping their uncle and all of that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the more organized format of this. So they are incredibly adaptive in orientation. And so what you find is a signaling, a mutual exchange of an interaction between the Nigerian state and these groups, where they're able to find collaborators and saboteurs within the security architecture of Nigeria that helps them. So some of those who have been arrested on the side of Boko Haram, for example, I've received training from the Nigerian military.
Yes.
The tank drivers in particular, tank drivers were very well prized for their skills, so they could teach Boko Haram members these acts. But
how do they get to recruit? How do they get, what links are valuable? I know you talked about links, some kind of benefits that come in. If the Nigerian army, the Nigerian military has trained sophisticated, well-skilled individuals in driving tanks, how do they get up to the camp of the enemy?
It is surprisingly easy. I think a majority of people join the Army or Navy, Air Force, wanting to serve their fatherland, give their best and all of that. But one of what I found in my research is that we do not make it worth their while. We do not make it worth their time or lives or energy.
Their values not appreciated.
Yeah. So, for example, and again, I shared this at the security conference I attended recently, how within 2 to 3 months of a soldier being killed in battle, their families may be kicked out of the barracks. And the salaries are stopped. Their children, their spouses become destitute. And then if they have parents, and you get the point, and all kinds of issues. Now, what message are we sending to the troops at the war theater about what might happen to their children and their wives
if similar things happen?
If a similar thing happens. Yeah. So this is one of the ways we are indirectly demotivating these individuals. In other words, this is not a system that cares. And then people are sent to war and they come back 3-4 years. If they're lucky, that some have stayed longer than that. So rotation issue is also part of it.
A combination of factors fuel the crisis we have in Nigeria. First, we have a demoralized set of officers. We have officers who want to benefit. We have a community that is there helpless. So you have a combination of so many factors making it impossible for there to be any meaningful resistance to those who are coming in. Now, is there any effort you have seen that has some semblance of effort, that has some semblance of some action that you can take to government? Or what you are seeing is inability, failure on the part of the government to really address these issues?
So a lot depends on what community we're talking about, what troops or battalion and so on have been deployed there, and the leadership of the military in those war theaters and their actions or inaction in relation to the communities. Now, field commanders have a level of authority in areas of deployment, and that's important to acknowledge. It's not just what is happening at the defense headquarters here in Abuja. It's also what they do right there on the field and that negotiation. And some, I think, have done a great job of working very closely with communities, and the results would show. But others, again, depending on the intent for going there, personal enrichment versus serving the country.
Yes.
It was removed from a command post before incompetence. The same man was the one who succeeded, took Buratai as chief of army staff when he was removed. So when you interfere as a civilian government in the affairs of the military in that manner, where those you put in key strategic positions are neither the best nor the brightest, we should be prepared for the consequence, because you're muddling the waters, you're introducing toxic politics into the affairs of the military bureaucracy, and the consequences are incalculable. So I think that is an ongoing issue for us in the country, especially given our multi-ethnic, multi-religious nature. But it's not all doom and gloom. I believe there are very gallant officers and soldiers to this day who are willing and ready to lay down their lives for the country. The question is, are we making it worth it?
Let's look at it straight in the face. Do we have a problem, more problem of coordination than the problem of funding in tackling our insurgency? Because from the challenges and the factors we have enumerated, it doesn't appear it is funding that is lacking.
No.
And even if you put the funding there, it probably will not even solve the problem.
The funding is quite spectacular, in my opinion. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars that have been poured in, material, arms and ammunition, and all of that. I won't go into how some of those funds are spent, but coordination has been a big issue. But also sagging patriotism. Where are people's allegiances, especially those with major responsibilities for the prosecution of these various conflicts? So where folks are more concerned about dealing with the issues or managing the issues rather than dealing with it decisively, it becomes an issue. The current vice president, when he was governor of Borno State, was very clear in terms of the link between the identities of commanders at the war theater and the capacity of the troops to be successful. We have this problem of insecurity because it is politicized. I think we've made that point over and over again. So for me, that is the starting point. That is foundational. If you're going to play games because you're thinking of some sort of political calculus, I would not want to be part of that. So that's the first clarification that I will seek to have. Now, the second thing is to adopt and utilize where available and to procure where unavailable the latest technologies. You could be here in Abuja and you're having surveillance of Sambisa Forest with no single individual there, but you're monitoring. And there are heat sensors that can tell you if people are there and can show you, again, if they're carrying weapons. If you're a farmer, how come there are 25, 30, 50, 60 of you in a single location? And what are those objects that look like rifles? What are you doing with rifles at 1 a.m. As a farmer on the field somewhere in Borno State or in the field somewhere in Oyo State? So troops can then be deployed very scientifically. Special forces, you don't need 50,000 troops for that. So targeted locations under surveillance for weeks, so not just one at any given, multiple, where you have smaller teams dedicated to different zones and actionable intelligence kept to a small number of people. So I know that if this leaks, I know the people in the room when that discussion was had, we know who to go after. And then you can deploy your special forces and your drones. The technology has gotten to that level. And if there's anything we've learned in the war between Russia and Ukraine, it is that you can use technology effectively to get an upper hand in an asymmetric warfare environment. So that would be my stance. And I understand why we're doing mass recruitments, whether that's in the police or army. I think that is necessary. The police civilian ratio is very low. It's one of the poorest in the world, where you have one policeman or policewoman for over 500 citizens.
Yes.
So I understand that. But I would be working with much smaller teams. I would be dealing more with special forces. And this would be technologically driven, intelligence driven. And yes, we will pay for intelligence. Governments pay for intelligence all the time. Insurgent groups, terrorist groups pay for intelligence all the time. We will incentivize our citizens to give us intelligence, and we will offer them protection. In other words, your family will be safe with us. Because part of the issues we have is that they don't trust that we will protect them. The reason why during the Cold War, a Ukrainian or Belarusian or Russian would run to the American embassy to report on what their government was doing is because they trusted that the U.S. would protect them. Whether or not they're seeking some sort of financial compensation for the intel is a different subject matter. But they had this subliminal trust that once I enter that embassy, they will protect me. We need to get to that level. And how you do that is put resources in the right place. Get people to begin to see that you're working for them and on their behalf, and that you will take care of them and their loved ones if there are any consequences coming to them as a result of what they've shared with you. So this is not rocket science.
One sentence. Is Boko Haram defeated, degraded, or insurgent in 2026?
Boko Haram has metastasized. It is no longer contained to a single battlefield. It is no longer a single entity. It is now multiple entities enjoying tremendous organic support at some of the highest levels in our country, especially in the political system and in the military industrial complex. And to defeat it, we need to be smart. And we need to do better than we are currently doing.
And let's talk about the number. How many years until Northwest's, Northeast banditry is under control if we start right today?
We can get this done, in my opinion, within a 2 to 5 year time frame, where the state can regain full control. It will not happen overnight. But 2 years is probably a bit optimistic, but closer to 5 years is hard-on pragmatic. That can happen with tangible results seen within a year and incremental results afterwards. But we've got to start soon.
Please, can you help me size up the problem? Why will it take up to 5 years?
In part because the problem is not just with those who have enlisted in Boko Haram or joined the ranks of bandits. There is a lot of social re-engineering that has to happen while we're fighting the war and we're and retraining people and all that. There is a level of social mobilization that has to happen and social engineering around economic welfare, empowerment of people, because you have too many individuals who are unable to be unwilling to side with insurgents because of their economic conditions. One example that you may already be familiar with is the fact that amongst the rescued women and children and girls from Boko Haram, when Shakao in particular was still alive, there were those who went back to Zambisa forest because they felt their lives there were better off than in the broader society. We need to create that society that people would choose over going to Boko Haram at their camp in Zambisa forest.
And what's the number one thing Nigerians believe about insecurity that is wrong?
It would by far and away have to be the presupposition that this is an exclusive preserve of the government. We're all responsible for security. And no, I don't mean we all have to take up arms and ammunition. That's not what I mean. But I mean that we're responsible in part for what happens in the environment. When we speak of countries around the world that are relatively safe, one of the reasons why it is safe is that people call the authorities to report things very quickly. And this may surprise some of the audience. In Canada, in the US, and other Western countries, in fact, the police rarely discover crimes. The bulk of the crimes or potentially criminal actions that come to the attention of the authorities are from phone calls, tips, messages from citizens. It is rare that two police officers in a police cruiser driving around find crime. That's not how it works. Much of that research shows is, in fact, very performative, just to make people feel good.
So, in the real sense of the word, the miracle that we are expecting the Nigerian government to perform is rife with the citizens.
It needs the cooperation, active cooperation of the citizens, so that you notice that this building on your street is unoccupied, but every few nights a week, strange people come and go, carrying bags of things you have no idea about, whether that is cash, whether that is weapons, and so forth. You have a responsibility as a citizen to report that. Don't say it is not your business, because it is your business.
But now, Prof, camera on you. Parents in Ogbomoso communities would send kids to school soon. IDPs in Bonu can't farm. And what's your message of hope and hard truth to Nigerians living under this fear? Speak directly to them.
Well, I would simply say that we must not lose hope in our country. It is the only country that we have, at least for most of our citizens. And to understand that this season shall pass. And to not let the insurgents or terrorists win by refusing to send their children to school. In my research, I've come across families where that happened, especially in the Chibok case, where some of the rescued girls decided they were done with schooling, and the next thing was to go and get married. If we do that, they win, and we must not let them win. And we must take education as the first and most significant heritage that we can give to our children.
We must thank you, Prof. Professor Tope Oriola. Thank you for your clarity, and thanks for sharing your time with us.
My pleasure.
Professor Tope Oriola is a professor of criminology at the University of Alberta, far away in Canada. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Listeners, your thought. Should the states arm school guards, or will that make things worse for everybody? If this episode gave you context, please share it and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I am Augustine Okeria Agbonsuremi. Thanks for listening. Deep Insight, the inside story, analyzing Nigeria, one conversation at a time.